Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. Welcome to our International Grad Student Drop-in sessions. In these sessions, Christine and I will talk about how international grad students who will arrive for the winter 2021 term, and that's when the Canadian winter is very harsh for all the new international grad students. My name is Shufeng Cao. I'm the Graduate Student Association, or GSA, International Student Coordinator. And Christine?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Meyer, and I am a counselor on our campus. And I have been on campus for many moons, and I'm just really excited to have this opportunity to talk a little bit about how to prepare for our Canadian winters, because even if you're a Canadian like me, lived here your whole life, every time it happens, it can be a bit jarring. So just happy to be able to share this information with everybody. Okay, so here we go. So I am looking down at notes today. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking down at. But we just wanted to start with this welcome to Canada and winter with this little meme. I think it's funny, and it really speaks to, you know, what can happen. And when you're Canadian, yeah, sometimes -30 doesn't feel bad. It feels slightly warm. And, you know, when it gets to 5 degrees in the winter, you may see people who are Canadians with shorts on all of a sudden. That's not that common, but it can happen. So I think this joke captures. And the other thing to know about Canadians are, we do talk a lot about our weather just generally. So whether we're talking about winter weather or summer weather, it is something we talk about. And I think that's because we have a lot of variation in our weather. And so it is something you will find that lots of Canadians will comment on when you're chit-chatting or making small talk with people that you're getting to know. They will talk about the weather. Be forewarned. Yeah, next slide. So getting back to winter weather, one of the things about our Canadian winter is that the winter can last anywhere from November all the way through to April. We will start to see snow around this time of year, although in years past we have had a green Christmas, which for us Canadians means we don't have snow on the ground when we hit the end of December. But temperatures can be anywhere from -5 to -15 degrees Celsius, just as a norm. But then the thing that you have to keep in mind is what's called the wind chill, where when you look at your weather forecast, it'll say it's -5 the temperature, but with the wind chill, it feels like -20. And so really then you're preparing for with the wind chill, right? Because that's how cold it will feel when you get outside. And so that's why it's important to be prepared, right? The variability in our winter, it could start out a little bit warmer, like maybe only -5 in the morning, but by the time you're leaving campus at the end of the day, the sun's now gone very early at 5, and it now feels like -30. So we have to be prepared. So winter clothing. Shufeng has put together these examples of winter clothing, the kinds of things we'd want you to think about. And to think about buying once you get here, because I know in some of our students who are coming from warmer climes, you don't often have access to the clothing that you need that is rated often to -20 degrees Celsius. That's, you know, not necessarily needed all the time, but if you are someone that's going to be spending time outside, like just walking to campus, or you are somebody that enjoys doing outside things in our Canadian winter, then that -20 degrees Celsius rating is something to pay attention to. And there you can see that it's not cheap, but think about it as an investment. If you're going to be with us for several years, that same coat will last you, because when you're spending, you know, in that price range of $300 to $500, you're going to get a better quality coat. It will last, right? You dry clean it at the end of the season. Some of the coats you can actually wash in your washing machine, so you will be able to use it for the whole time you're with us. So it is important to pay attention, get a good coat. And things to think about with the coat are a hood, and a hood that really does, you know, kind of do up tightly. It is very windy on our campus. You can almost feel like you're being blown around physically. Think about the length of your coat. I know when we're going for fashion, we'll sometimes get a shorter coat that stops at our waist. But again, if you're going to be out waiting for a bus, walking on our campus, a longer coat that goes mid-thigh or even longer, it would be preferred. We can't always look stylish in the winter here, unfortunately. Think about your layers, because you're going to be in buildings that, you know, some will be warmer, some may not be as warm. So you want to be doing layers too. So, you know, cotton t-shirts, then maybe a shirt, then maybe a hoodie, and then your winter coat. And then once you get in the building, taking off your winter coat. And the same things, you might need layers too, with socks, different things like that. Some people, especially if you have an office on campus, once you get situated, then you may keep like your sneakers or your running shoes or just your day-to-day shoes in your office, right? And then when you get to campus, take your boots off, because when we want the boots to serve you well when you're walking in, you know, what feels like -20 weather, imagine how hot your feet will get during the day in a warm building. So to think about some of those things too. Yeah, am I missing anything, Shubhang? Is there things that you think that we should add to this? No? And then the only other thing is, even if you're not a hat, don't go back to the side. If you're not a hat person, again, a hood or earmuffs. You can see a picture of the earmuffs at the top. If you're somebody that doesn't want your hair to get disturbed with a hat, pulling a hat on and off, right? It can be hard on your hair. Think about earmuffs. It'll cover your ears. And then the hood, because that really is important. We lose a lot of heat through our head. And so keeping our heads covered is important. Okay, that was my last thought. Next slide. Okay, tips to manage our Canadian winter. So weather forecast, as I said, we like to talk about our weather regardless of the season, but in the winter, it's really important to check that forecast before you leave in the morning. So I know on the university's homepage, we've got a link to weather, and there's also what's called the Weather Network. There's a variety of different places you can find weather info, but check before you leave and look through the day too, to see, you know, if you're going to be on campus till 10 at night, look to see what are they forecasting. Again, this isn't an exact science, but it is important in our winter to have a sense of what's going to happen. We can go from really cold to all of a sudden having a warm spell, and now all that snow and ice is melted, which just reminded me of another tip for the winter clothing. Boots, when you're looking at buying winter boots, think about them having some water resistance, because of what I just explained, that we can go from trudging through fairly deep snow, like could be 6 inches or more of snow, and then it melts. And now we're in that much water in the winter. So water resistance is good, but also, you know, being aware of those fluctuations in the weather, and knowing that, you know, sometimes in Canada, depending on how bad the snow is, or freezing rain, where we can have the temperatures hover, rain falls, and then it gets cold and everything freezes over. It can be treacherous for walking and driving in those conditions. So when all of that is happening, what may end up happening is things will close. Now, our campus at UW closes very infrequently. And what we learned in the pandemic is we all have the capability to work remotely. So now I think what we'll see maybe is even fewer days when our campus closes, because we have that understanding that we can carry on with business as usual. But if the university campus was going to close because of weather, the UW homepage will give you that information. And it's usually about by 7 in the morning, they would have something posted, so you would know what was open and closed on campus, whether you should come at all. Yeah. And then moving on, in terms of seasonal affective disorder, for those of you coming from warmer climes, and I know many of our international students do join us from warmer climes, this is not something you would have a lot of awareness of, but it is something that we see here in North America, and especially Canada, where we end up in our winter months having less sunlight. And we know that for some people that can impact their mood. And the thinking behind that is because it impacts some of the chemicals in our brain that help us regulate our mood and help us maintain a more positive mood. So for some people in the winter months, the lack of sunlight means that they're getting fewer of those chemicals, which then means that they can have something called seasonal affective disorder. So it is a form of depression. It does occur seasonally, so people will start to, you know, at this time of year, it'll start to become an issue all the way through our winter. And again, related to that decreased sunlight in our winter months, about 15% of Canadians can experience a mild form of this. And it can include things like feeling hopeless, feeling irritable, tired, disinterested, just wanting to stay in your house, those kinds of things. Now, the one thing I'm aware of is we're talking to our incoming grad students, and some of those things can also just be part of a transition, right? Even if you're really excited to be here, transition itself can sometimes impact our mood and our motivation. So it may be difficult when you first arrive to figure out how much of this is related to just the stress of moving away, moving to a new environment, and how much of it is related to the way that winter is impacting you. But that is something to be, to just pay attention to. One of the things to consider with that is when you get to campus, if you haven't done this already, and you may not have, because it may not have been an issue again back home, is thinking about going to health services. So that's the medical service on our campus. They're in a separate building. It's called health services. They have lab services. You can get a blood work done and have your vitamin D levels checked, because sometimes what can happen is with the lack of sunlight here in Canada, I've had a number of my international grad students then be finding out getting blood work done because they were feeling fatigued and just off, and realizing that they actually have a vitamin D deficiency. And then you take supplements and the doctor can let you know what that amount would be. And so that's an important thing to think about. If you are experiencing some of those symptoms, to think about going to health services. Let's rule out that it's not a vitamin D deficiency. And then you would want to take the supplements. In Canada, our milk is also fortified. Our dairy products and milk are fortified with vitamin D. So that's another way, if you are able to eat dairy, that you can get that. We do have a dietitian on our campus that can also talk to you about diet if you're thinking about how can I more naturally increase my vitamin D in my diet. And the dietitian would be housed in our health services. But if you do find your mood is off, whether that's because of the transition to grad studies and being away from home, or it's our winter, the impact of that and the lack of sunlight, other resources to consider on campus are counseling services. So I'm a member of counseling services. I spend my time in our embedded site in engineering, and we have counselors that spend time in other places, science and co-op and the resident system. And then we have counselors that just are in our main building in the Needles Hall extension and see our students from across campus, grad and undergrad. And the process, I just had a message pop up on Teams. The process, if you do want to see a counselor, is you can call or you can show up in person. The first thing would be you'd be given an appointment with one of our intake specialists, and they're people that are just trained to meet with students and just gather some basic factual information about your concern. And then they would talk to you about resources, whether that's a group, whether that's seeing somebody like myself personally. There's a bunch of resources that could be suggested. If you do see a counselor, just because I'm aware this isn't something that is common in all cultures, but know that everything that you talk to the counselor about is confidential. We would not tell anybody about the things you're talking to us about unless you give us permission to do that, and there's a form to be completed. So it is a place where you can safely go and talk about challenges, struggles, anything like that. We've talked about health services. Athletics is another place that students find helpful when they're thinking about balancing their wellness and you're new to campus, because of there's intramural sports. There's all kinds of resources that you can use through athletics that'll get you moving, which we know is important for managing stress, managing our mood. They have I think the program is called Move Your Mind, where they're able to pair you. It's something that you can access through a link on their athletics website, Move Your Mind, and they will meet with you and then figure out what are your fitness needs, right? Are you somebody who's never been to a gym and you're feeling kind of awkward and not sure where to start? So athletics can also be a good resource to use in terms of even getting used to campus, right? Intramural sports, if there is a sport that you like to play, would be a place you might be able to meet other people, right? When we're thinking about our wellness and starting to get to know people on campus. Then there's all kinds of apps that you can use to support your mental health and just your health, and just be more mindful of what's going on with your mood. Happify is one. Wellness Together is a website. Bounce Back Ontario is another website that offer modules that'll take you through managing your mood and give you access to coaches and counselors. And those are resources separate from the ones that you would access on our campus. Oh, geez, there I am. I've moved on to the next slide and didn't even know it. Yeah, okay. Oh, yes. It's moisturizer or lip balm. You might think, well, that's an odd thing. Why do they have this? Because what you'll find when you're here is that with our forced air heatings in our buildings and the cold temperatures outside, is that even if you've never been somebody that needed to use moisturizer on your skin or lip balm, you may find in your Canadian winters that your skin gets more irritated, more dry, even your scalp, all of those things, your lips. And so having those things available is probably going to be helpful. And we've talked about vitamin D, and then just self-care. And I'm touching on some of that with the, the athletics in the program. And they can offer, of course, the GSA, who is co-hosting with me today. They have a wide range of wellness things, or things to support your wellness, everything from, well, they have their wellness drop-ins, their social events for our international grad students and just our grad students in general. So the GSA can be a really good resource when you're looking at how can I start to build community, and get lots of information just about how to navigate our campus. A lot of the services and the systems on our campus, I would point you to the GSA and their website. Lots of good information there. The Student Success Office is another place that you can go on campus that will, they do have their international peer community that's made up of both international grad and undergrad students. And they offer some social programming, as well as access, I believe, to an immigration consultant. And they've got their own grad ready programming for our incoming international grad students. So to think about those resources when I'm thinking about where are the places you want to connect, maybe right when you get to campus, it would be, yeah, GSA, look at what the Student Success Office has, make sure you know where counseling and health are located physically on our campus and have their contact information handy, because you may find with the stress of transferring to grad studies that you end up maybe having more colds or flus or things like that, because when we're stressed, our immune system gets compromised. And so important to know where those things are so you're not scrambling when you're already feeling unwell. And then I think, Jufeng, the GSA is going to have their service fair in January, aren't they? And that would be another place once on campus to find out about and access resources and information about. Am I remembering that right?
Yes, that's correct. So the service fair will be hosted on Friday, January 13 afternoon. So for whoever registered for the service fair, you will have the opportunity to talk to those departments or units in person.
Yeah, so that's something to consider. And then just again, when we're thinking about self-care, again, to think about ways that we can move, and that becomes even harder in our Canadian winter, especially if you're not somebody that likes the cold, right? There are some people that like the cold weather, they engage in winter sports. If that's something you're wanting to try, I'd encourage you, because I know that people who enjoy winter sports find our winters more tolerable because they have something to look forward to that they can only do when there's snow on the ground. There is a local ski hill called Chicopee. They do often they offer student discounts certain days. And that would be a place that you could, learn if you want to try skiing, try snowboarding. They also have tubing, which is more like sledding, being on just sort of an inner tube or a sled and going down a hill. Sounds scary. It's actually kind of fun. If you are a thrill seeker, think about those things. But even just thinking about, because again, when we're thinking about managing our stress and our mood, that's why moving our bodies is important. So even walking in your building, right, in the winter, or learning the tunnel system and walking the buildings that way to get up and get moving, however you can do that. If you don't want that to be outside, do it inside. I know there's lots of apps that give us really quick workouts that we can do from our desk or from your office. a good one that I've heard a lot of good things about from some of the grad students I support on campus is called Fit On. And I think it's got, it deals with fitness, but it also, I think, has other wellness things associated with it that'll help with self-care. So no, when I'm thinking about self-care, it's, yeah, moving your body, making sure that you are eating. And if we think vitamin D is an issue, right, we're looking at the vitamin D rich foods and maybe the supplements. We're slowly finding ways to start to create a social network, knowing that that can take months, right? That will not, for some of you, that will not have happened by the end of your first term, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. That just means that creating community takes time. And so the first thing you need to familiarize yourself is just, right, what building am I working, taking my classes, right? Where's my lab? And getting to know the people in your office. I would say look for events in your department that you're going to, because often there are grad student associations that are located in each faculty, and they will host events for grad students, whether those are social events or, you know, seminars related to, you know, your academics or other, you know, learning opportunities. So pay attention to what your department grad student association or GSA is hosting, because that's another way to start to build community. And then to remember, it takes a while to build community, but an important thing to start to think about, right? And just because we know of the benefits of that for our health and mental health, and community looks different. So for some of us who are introverted like myself, who we're okay with, right, a closer, smaller group of 1 or 2 people we can count on, and others, right, that are more extroverted in their personality style like to have large groups. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, right? It's just knowing what works best for you. And thinking about, you know, there are going to be days in our winter where we can't necessarily get out, but we don't want to spend all our time working, because that's not good for your health or mental health as grad students. Although I know that there's pressure to do that, but it's not good. So to think about, are there a list of activities that you could have handy or engage with that are different from your academics and your research and different from scrolling on our devices? Because we can all amuse ourselves on our devices, but that's not always the best thing for our wellness too. So to think about already, are there activities that you already do or you always wanted to try that you can make sure you have access to, right? Whether that's, I like cooking, so I'm going to make sure I have the ingredients to cook my favorite dish. I'm going to learn how to bake. I'm going to finally figure out how to do a Rubik's Cube. I'm going to learn how to lock pick. And there is a large community on Reddit related to that, believe it or not, right? I'm going to get a puzzle and do a puzzle. So thinking about, are there ways like that, things like that, that you could have on hand, knowing that you're going to need a break, knowing that we can't always get out in the winter. And I think too, accepting that every day is not going to be easy, but eventually you're going to get used to it. That might be the best you can hope for. And for some of you, you may actually end up enjoying our Canadian winters. Yes, and there, another good humorous graphic to again, Canadians and their winter, right? Yeah. So you'll hear us complaining now about how cold it is, and you're going to hear us complaining in the summer about how hot it is, because especially in Southern Ontario, where some of you will be living, the humidity can be quite striking. And so the temperature says one thing, but with the humidity, it feels like, right? So welcome to Canadian winter. Yeah. But I think that's all the information I wanted to convey, but happy to answer questions about anything related to this or just anything related to wellness in general, as you think about joining us in January. Yeah, that's the assumption I'm making. Maybe you've already joined us, the people that we have with us today. But yeah, Shufeng, I didn't know if there were things I missed, other things you wanted to add.
Let me start the recording right now.